Madam Speaker, I move the Assembly now discuss the matter of public importance.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Honourable members, I have received correspondence from the member for Daly as follows. I propose for discussion this day the following definite matter of public importance: the state of maternity services in the Northern Territory. The letter is signed by the member for Daly. Is discussion supported? Yes. 4 members are standing. It is supported. Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a matter of public importance tonight that we discuss the state of our Territory's maternity services and the Health Minister's failure to be open and accountable with Territorians about what he is doing about it. Because putting it frankly, Madam Speaker, expectant Territory mothers are scared and uncertain about the future of maternity services right here in the Northern Territory. Since HealthScope announced back in February this year that private maternity services were being pulled, those expected Territory mothers asked themselves, where am I going to have my baby? Still, to this day, expectant Territory mothers and their families are asking the question, will I be able to have my baby in a safe, orderly and relaxed environment? Madam Speaker, the current crisis in maternity care isn't on our amazing healthcare professionals. They are working incredibly hard in very difficult circumstances to deliver the very best care they possibly can to Territory mothers and babies. It is squarely with this Health Minister who, 12 months on, has still failed to address this incredibly critical issue surrounding continuity of care and creating certainty for expecting Territory mothers. Let's look at his timeline of inaction. He is told the private maternity ward was closing in September last year. He didn't do anything. When HealthScope announced the closure publicly in February this year, he had admitted he'd known about it for months, but still didn't do anything. He finally wrote to the Federal Minister seeking assistance in May, some 8 months later. 8 months it took the Health Minister to write to the federal government, to the Federal Minister on this issue. We are now 12 months on, and it turns out that he still hasn't provided the federal government with any details to back up his funding request. He just asked for a bucket of money and expected it to be handed over, no questions asked. This is in stark contrast to Tasmania, who found themselves in a similar position when HealthScope closed private maternity services there. They sought help from the federal government straight away, provided details to back up their ask and got that funding. They understood how important the issue was for local mums and bubs. Territory families and expectant mums here are still waiting for our Health Minister to demonstrate this level of concern for what they are currently experiencing. But in true CLP form, rather than actually doing his job, the Health Minister has pointed the finger at the federal government. It's getting to be a very tired tactic in this House, very, very tired tactic. And I know the mothers of the Northern Territories, the families of the Northern Territory who are expecting their kids are getting tired of the Health Minister blaming everyone but himself. This should be on the top of his agenda. The Health Minister should be flying down to Canberra and meeting with Mark Butler to raise these serious concerns. Or at the very least, pick up the phone and call the Health Minister to express how concerning this issue is for our Territory mothers. Because right now, Territory women, their families, and the health staff are still coming forward with horror stories on how this inaction is impacting them. Madam Speaker, there has been an absolute chorus of voices about this issue. Territorians desperate for the government to act. But the Health Minister continues to keep his ears closed. Some women are flying interstate to have their babies because they're just not sure they'll get continuity of care here in the Northern Territory. One mum told the story of having to labour in a tea room because there was no other place for her to go. When she wrote to the Health Minister about it, do you know what she got? She got the press release dot points from this minister. The press release dot points. He didn't even have the courtesy to respond in a sensitive way, acknowledge what she had just gone through, showed no care for her, just sent off dot points from his press release and goes, you know, there you go, this is what I care, this is how I think about you, there's our press release, bad luck. Madam Speaker, earlier this month, more than 100 mothers, fathers, family members and healthcare professions gathered together at a local cafe to run an Our Birth, Our Voice forum and discuss how this crisis could be resolved. Yes, that's right, Madam Speaker. The peoples most impacted by this crisis are out there trying to find solutions themselves because the Health Minister can't or won't do his job. These women's, families and health workers are a comprehensive cross-section of the community, and I applaud their work that they're doing across the Northern Territory. But let me put this on the record. The things that they want to see happen to get maternity services back on track in the top end. They want to see families want sufficient continuity of care to help build trust and spot issues more quickly to improve outcomes. Health workers are wanting the government to address workforce shortages, uncertain contracts, and the casualisation of the workforce that is causing skilled midwives to leave the Territory. Families are wanting a better approach for families who suffer the loss of a child, along with more staff bereavement training. Families are wanting to see a consumer group set up to consult with NT Health because they feel there is a lack of transparency and community consultation regarding changes within services. I also understand Our Birth, Our Voice forums, bundled of recommended strategies to this government, will reflect the women's centred care strategic directions for the Australian maternity services, which they are asking the NT government to implement. So, Madam Speaker, I ask the Minister for Health to respond to these very sensitive solutions. What is he doing about it, particularly ensuring women and their babies have continuity of care? Because expectant Territory mothers know that this issue is not going away. And I hope that he will take the appropriate amount of time tonight to explain and provide an adequate response. Because this is about Territory mothers. This isn't about politics. This should be above politics. It shouldn't be about blaming anyone else. And I heard the Treasurer mumble under his breath, of course it's about politics. What an absolutely disgraceful thing to say. That here we have the Treasurer mumbling that under his breath when we have expected mothers in the Northern Territory not even have access to maternity services. What an absolute disgraceful thing to say. And for that to come out of the Treasurer's mouth when he has control over the budget. He could have implemented this in his last budget to ensure that the maternity services stayed on in the Northern Territory, but yet here he is mumbling under his breath, laughing. He is laughing right now to the minister because he doesn't care about Territory mothers. And it's an absolute disgrace, and he continues to call out. He's continuing to yell out when here I've just given an example of a mother giving birth in a tea room. Do you think that's good enough, Treasurer? He's gone quiet now because he's been called out for his poor behaviour, Madam Speaker. And like I said, it's above politics. We shouldn't be blaming anyone else. You're in government. You could have resolved this issue. It took you 8 months to even write to the federal minister. So earlier this week, we saw the Health Minister get up in arms about lacking support. But his lines are not passing the pub test, Madam Speaker, especially not for expected Territory mothers who want to see action and not just words. The Health Minister is currently at the table with the Federal Health Minister. Well, you are at the table because you go to those co-ord meetings with the Health Minister, but why haven't you been asking those questions to the Health Minister?
Okay, stop the interjections. Order. And direct your comments through me. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we heard the member for Solomon even provide Territorians last Tuesday on ABC Radio Darwin with an update stating we're currently waiting for an additional information from the Northern Territory Government on the proposal. So the ball's in the Northern Territory Government's court to provide that additional information to justify their request. So the way the Health Minister acted earlier this week shows that maternity services are not even on his radar, and it's an absolute shame on him. Territory women want to see real traction on this issue. I, for one, want to ensure that they get it because they are tired of this issue being a political football. So the Territory Labor opposition team and I will continue to raise this issue in Parliament. Because we don't want to see expectant Territory mothers and their families without certainty or continuity of care. And I pick up from the interjection from the member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏. I'm not sure if he's aware, but the member for Solomon isn't a minister, so I don't know why you're calling out, well, why don't you write to the Minister 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙎𝙏. So,
Okay.
but he's
Order.
not, so like you're getting it wrong.
Order.
But the reality is, Madam Speaker, the reality is the member for 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙎𝙏 is part of the CLP government.
Could you pause, please, member for Daly? What's your point of order, member?
Thank you, Madam
𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙎𝙏?
Speaker. I just raised Standing Order 20. I know it's late in the night, but we are actually, everyone is guilty of it right now. We're talking about maternity services. We're talking about vulnerable women. Everyone has the opportunity to talk. It's 2 hours. Just picking up on the interjections. It's not what expecting mums want to hear.
Okay, I concur. The
Thank
member will
you.
be heard in silence. No interjections.
Member for 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙎, and I totally agree with your comments there. But like I said, the member for 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙎, if you're concerned about this, I'm looking forward to your contribution to this debate tonight. We all have a couple of hours to talk on this, so you're raising those concerns. I would love to see you come out, Madam Speaker, the member for 𝙏𝙏𝙏𝙎, and speak on this important issue, because it is above politics. It's above politics. And I would hope that all members from the CLP government would speak on this issue, because it's important. And the CLP members, they are in government, they have control of the budget, they have control of the money, they have the power to actually oversee this and bring back maternity services for those mothers. So, Madam Speaker, as I was saying, we want to ensure that we are holding the Health Minister accountable, as our job is to do in opposition, to ensure that he is listening to Territory women and families, and especially our wonderful health staff. Because I know we can all agree in this chamber, Madam Speaker, that when you're having a baby or visiting a friend who has just had a baby, that it should be one of the most beautiful, most positive experiences you can have. Madam Speaker, broadening out, Madam Speaker, under this Health Minister, there are other major shortcomings when it comes to the overall health service delivery, and it all interlinks to the maternity services. It was earlier this year that Territorians heard that the Territory Public Hospital system was to receive a 30% increase in funding from the Federal Labor Government, amounting to $560 million for the 2025-2026 budget, the largest out of any jurisdiction in the country, to help reduce emergency department wait times and cut surgical backlogs. Madam Speaker, this was an excellent deal for Territorians because we know that funding for our Territory hospitals is desperately needed. Again, we welcome this funding. It's great to know that a Federal Labor Government understands that Territorians, regardless of where they live, deserve excellent health care. Healthcare should be delivered in a safe, culturally appropriate, accessible and timely manner with the proper health infrastructure as needed because it benefits everyone in the community. We know that the Northern Territory faces unique challenges. The high supply chain cost and the distances patients and medical staff must travel to access and provide care make healthcare delivery challenging. We know that the Northern Territory is also home to some of the most ill patients in this country, with Aboriginal Territorians battling higher rates of chronic diseases and representing a high proportion of hospital patients here in the Northern Territory. So, with this investment from the Commonwealth Government in our Territory public hospital system comes responsibility. Responsibility on the part of this CLP government and the Minister for Health to show Territorians that they're putting this money to good use. To demonstrate that this increase in funding, even the smallest amount, can translate into safer and more timely care for our expecting mothers, for our maternity services, and better health outcomes for our health staff and Territorians. The health system is a true pillar of the government, and for us on this side of the House, it barely registers in the pillars of governance, as seen in the Deputy Chief Minister's comments in previous sittings. Because if you don't get behind their three pillars of government, and only those three, you can leave the Territory. No mention of health as a key staple of government. None whatsoever. The fact is...
Could you just pause? I can hear you two talking over there. If you could keep it down, please. Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The fact is that for over a year, the Minister for Health has either lacked competence or been naive when it comes to the delivery of Territory's healthcare system. The pressure on our hospital system is immense. The pressure on our outstanding healthcare staff is immense. And I know this because the Minister for Health says he knows this. But overall, what is he actually doing about it? Because we're hearing stories from Territorians, health staff and stakeholders outside of these parliamentary walls. Territorians are seeing friends and families waiting countless hours in the emergency department, waiting countless hours to get an ambulance to attend to them, witnessing and hearing nurses and doctors, along with their unions, speaking out because of exhaustion and overall demoralisation. An attempt by this government to cover up when our hospitals are at crisis point by refusing to declare code yellows and only relenting when the pressure is on is so overwhelming that unions and health staff collective action. So, Madam Speaker, In closing,
There are no extensions.
yeah, but thank you anyway, I appreciate it. In closing, Madam Speaker, I do hope that the Minister does take this seriously. I do hope that the Minister can speak to the Federal Health Minister to talk about the maternity services, just like the Liberal government down in Tasmania. They took action, they spoke to the Federal Minister, and they were able to ensure that maternity services in Tasmania stayed open because they built relationships with the Health Minister. They put a plan out of exactly what the spending would be, and I hope that this CLP Minister in Steve Edgington can do the same. I really do.
Minister for Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and let's just clarify Tasmania because keeping health services open in Tasmania or maternity services, 2 private hospitals in Tasmania, Madam Speaker, 1 in the Territory, 1 closed in Tasmania, our only 1 closed here in Darwin. So again, the member for Daly has no idea what he's talking about, and he shouldn't be jumping up here making up stories, trying to compare apples with oranges, because he certainly doesn't have any idea whatsoever what he's talking about. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak about this matter. It's important in this context to talk about the state of maternity services in the Northern Territory, and that we talk about the whole of the Northern Territory, not just the situation in Darwin. As a remote member, Madam Speaker, I know that these issues don't just end at the Berrimah. Madam Speaker, across the Territory there's a wide range of maternity services. There's around 2,000 births per year at RDH every year. Every year. And I think the member for Daly indicated that there was no maternity services. He didn't clarify where, but he said there was no maternity services. I think he's clutching at straws. He didn't really know what he was talking about. But let me assure you, there's 2,000 births at the Royal Darwin Hospital every year. More than 600 babies, Madam Speaker, are born in the Alice Springs Hospital. More than 600 in Alice Springs. Birthing services in the NT are primarily available at the Royal Darwin Hospital, along with the Gove Hospital, Katherine and Alice Springs. We should also note that as the only tertiary level hospital for thousands of kilometres, the Royal Darwin Hospital is the escalation point for the Territory and beyond. It provides vital last resort supports and services for the whole of the NT and the broader region, including when the Darwin Private Hospital had complex and traumatic births where emergency support and escalated levels of care were required for private patients in the private system. It's important we recognise that for people outside of Darwin, they might not have alternatives to the use of our public maternity services, nor might they have readily and easily accessible services nearby. And our team at NT Health, our doctors, our nurses, midwives and other service providers do an outstanding and amazing job, and have done for many, many years, servicing the needs of all NT residents and those who use our services. Madam Speaker, in remote areas, parents receive pregnancy care at their local clinic until 37 weeks pregnant. Once mum and baby are well after birth at one of those hospitals and remote families return home, they are continued to be cared for by the community nurse and midwife at their local clinic. RDH also offers postnatal home visiting service when a midwife will visit parents and babies at home to provide breastfeeding support and postnatal care. Our maternity teams at our 4 birthing hospitals and midwifery services who help mums in pregnancy and on home births, our remote midwives and nurses deserve every bit of praise and recognition. As we all appreciate, Healthscope's decision to close Darwin Private Hospital's private maternity and birthing service in June 2025, 5 months ago, has caused disruption and had a significant impact on the affected pregnant women and their families. Not only has it been disappointing, but it has been immensely frustrating, both to the Territory residents who pay private health insurance premiums and may struggle to access services. And it's been particularly frustrating and annoying to me, Madam Speaker, as the Health Minister. Leading into this time, though, and since the closure, the government has been involved in a number of measures to address the issues and ensured that a level of private service option remained available here in Darwin. The government remains committed and continues to work through these issues. We want all Territory families to have choices when it comes to the birth of their babies. It seems the only people who don't really understand the removal of private maternity services by HealthScope was a decision of HealthScope is the NT Labor Party. Minister Butler acknowledged on the ABC radio on the 28th of February this year when he said, and I quote, "The Northern Territory Government under Minister Steve Edgington has been doing a terrific job, working with insurers to pick up the slack that HealthScope is going to leave, having withdrawn their maternity services." That's from the Federal Minister. At an operational level, NT Health has been working extremely hard to ensure the transition to Royal Darwin Hospital has been managed to the highest level of care. Our government stepped in when HealthScope stepped out. We made every concerted effort to provide a safe birthing experience for all mothers. Although these options do not replicate the model at the Darwin Private Hospital, they provide a comprehensive, safe and supportive maternity experience for private patients. I also want to note that just like when the private hospital was operating, our NT Health provided private maternity supports. Won't suit every mother or baby or may not be available for those with complex and difficult clinical needs. Not every family with a newborn will be in circumstances that allows them to access these packages. But I am heartened to know that all affected pregnant women and their families who have chosen to use the public maternity services and the supplementary private packages have been safely supported and cared for. As of the 8th of October 2025, I'm advised that 53 families had used the private maternity services packages. Of the packages, 21 families used the hotel retreat package and 32 families have used the return home sooner package. All 61 of the privately insured mothers affected by HealthScope's decision to close its maternity services have now given birth. It is reassuring that many families have expressed appreciation for NT Health staff, praising the midwives, lactation consultant and support teams for going above and beyond to provide care and positive experience, with a few patients describing their experience at Royal Darwin Hospital as very positive, particularly to the midwifery and domiciliary support throughout. Comments received from the private maternity families who stayed at the Mackay-Darwin Airport Resort said it provided a valuable opportunity for rest and time with family, and many families expressed satisfaction with the public-private hybrid model, suggesting it was innovative and should be considered for continuation in Darwin. To that end, the CLP government believes it is vital that as part of the resolution of the HealthScope sale process, privately run and managed maternity services to meet the needs of Territorians with private health insurance must be restored at the Darwin Private Hospital under whatever new ownership is established. We remain engaged directly with the receivers and the current operators, as well as the federal government, and will continue to engage with all interested parties. We think it is important that the federal government has a role to play here and remain open to positive and collaborative discussions with them on the importance of private hospital services and private maternity services here in Darwin. Madam Speaker, speaking to the Commonwealth, I've also been in regular contact with the Federal Health Minister to continue constructive discussions regarding Commonwealth support for the Northern Territory, and I recently spoke to him at a Health Ministers meeting in Perth. We're in discussions with the Commonwealth on funding, but we'll always make sure public maternity services are there for Territorians who need them. In addition to my contact and discussion with Minister Butler, despite the uninformed sniping of people like the federal member for Solomon, our health officials also remain engaged with the Commonwealth regarding the Northern Territory's request for additional funding support for our public maternity services. Unlike other states, we simply don't have an alternative private health service member for Daly in Darwin available for the federal government to fund. Our circumstances are not the same as Hobart or on the central coast of New South Wales, where a ready alternative is available. So stop comparing apples with oranges. We're working closely with the Commonwealth on the HealthScope sale to make sure Territorians keep real choice between public and private healthcare. Madam Speaker, there is no way we can have a discussion about health services in the NT without calling out the current funding levels that the Northern Territory receives from the Commonwealth to support our health system. The Northern Territory receives the lowest level of funding under the Commonwealth contribution rates, only 31.9% from the federal government, well below the national average of 37.5%. In fact, the National Cabinet, Madam Speaker, agreed in December 2023, included a commitment by the Commonwealth to increase its share under the NHRA to 45% over the 10 years to 2035, with an increase to 42.5% before 2030. Current NT health modelling, Madam Speaker, indicates that under the current Commonwealth funding offer, the NT would only hit 32.8% Commonwealth contribution rate funding by 2031, and that all Australian jurisdictions would remain below the 42.5 targets. I understand the Northern Territory has been historically underfunded for many years, probably going back as far as self-government, I would suggest. But, Madam Speaker, NT Health indicate that we would currently fall approximately $200 million per annum short of our fair share of funding. I do acknowledge the NT did receive an additional $51 million under the one-year health funding agreement, which was supposedly to assist the NT and address the historical funding shortfalls. And I say supposedly. If we were funded to at least the national average of Commonwealth contribution, we would receive an amount that would go a very long way to addressing our structural shortfalls. And that is before we even start to talk about the expenditure that the Northern Territory government makes on health and medical services that are primarily the responsibility of the federal government. Things that the Commonwealth are responsible for directly, but where NT Health spends Territory dollars because the necessary services and facilities are not provided by Canberra. Madam Speaker, aero medical services in the top end is costing our health system $51 million per annum. I've spoken about aged care patients, Madam Speaker. 60 to 80 every day of the week are in the hospital system. It's costing us $40 million per annum. Remote healthcare clinics, it is costing the Territory an additional it's costing us $95 million that should be paid for by the Commonwealth. Madam Speaker, the Commonwealth contribution funding shortfall, combined with the funding the NT spends meeting Commonwealth healthcare responsibilities, amounts to a total shortfall of Commonwealth health funding to the NT in the order of $386 million per annum. Let me just say that once more. We are short $386 million per annum that we should be receiving from the Commonwealth Government. The federal government have had our fully costed detailed plan for the $35 million maternity facility upgrade funding request for some time. The member for Solomon's commentary on this is frankly uninformed and absolute nonsense. If the member for Solomon put as much time into supporting the families of Darwin and Palmerston as he did talking about German grocery chains, our residents may well have some level of Commonwealth support for our maternity facilities by now. Madam Speaker, a couple of angry Facebook posts while mashing the keyboard simply won't get this resolved. Collaborative engagement with the Federal Minister, as I am doing, will go much further than political point scoring ever will. We acted swiftly to fill a void left by HealthScope. We stepped in as HealthScope stepped out. The Audi advocate should use his role as a Northern Australia envoy to actually achieve something for the Northern Territory. Perhaps he could finally reveal where and when his promised aged care beds for Darwin and Palmerston will actually be delivered. He crows about the increase in hospital funding from the federal government, but he fails to tell Territorians the truth about federal underfunding, as I spoke about earlier. Have you ever heard him say that that the Northern Territory is underfunded by $386 million per year? Why isn't the member for Solomon talking about that? Where's the member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎? Where's the senator for the Northern Territory, Melinderi McCarthy? $386 million per year in underfunding. What an absolute disgrace. What an absolute disgrace. And you can laugh, member for Daly. You might think it's funny that we're underfunded by so much, but don't come in here whinging, complaining about maternity services. I haven't heard you open your mouth once about the $386 million shortfall. It's high time you got on the wagon and started advocating for more money for the Northern Territory, rather than sitting there whinging, complaining, blaming others for the system we have here in the Northern Territory. How about actually doing something? Madam Speaker, a one-off extra payment still leaves us short-funded, and it isn't a solution to the legacy underfunding issue. He'll need to do a lot better than that. Earlier this year in my budget speech to the Parliament and in past questions from the opposition, I highlighted the dire straits of the Northern Territory health budget and the mess that Territory Labor left us when it came to the funding of health services in the Northern Territory. On coming to office, we found that the health budget spending had exceeded the allocation of funds by around $300 million by at least 2 years, a time under which I know the Leader of the Opposition was the Health Minister. In our budget this year, we acted, in this year of action from the CLP to provide additional base funding as part of the health budget. We included another $100 million per annum, not just a one-off, because we know that more needs to be done to improve health here in the Northern Territory. Labor had 8 years to upgrade maternity services. In 2,900 days, they failed to take action to improve maternity services. I'm not sure how many days Labor's part-time ministers actually worked. Natasha Fyles was the Health Minister from 2016 to 23 before she resigned. Even with a Chief Minister in the health portfolio, it seems Labor had no plans to make any sort of additional investment or upgrade in NT maternity services. The new opposition leader was the Health Minister after that from Christmas 23 until August 24, when Territorians unceremoniously voted them out. Crickets on improving maternity services when she was Minister. Of course, with Labor, you need to look at what they do when in government rather than what they say. They often make grandiose statements and issue wonderful-sounding press releases, then never actually give Territorians the thing they tell us they'll do. Labor was big on talk when they bothered to talk about maternity services at all, and failed on their promise when opening the Palmerston Regional Hospital that babies could one day be delivered there. In an ABC article from the 27th of September 2017, Natasha Fyles said, "As the hospital progresses, when it's appropriate, a clinical plan, women will be able to deliver at Palmerston." ABC said Ms Fyles did not provide a time frame for the full rollout. What happened to the plan by Natasha Fyles? Did the now opposition leader take that on? It would seem not. In another ABC story, this time from June the 3rd, 2021, former Chief Minister Fyles said the Labor government was looking at returning birthing facilities to remote and regional locations and hopes to do so within the next decade. The story stated Ms Fyles said investing in birthing on country services was a priority. Again, nothing I've seen since we came to government has shown any progress on this. Labor was all about platitudes and unfilled promises, not priorities. Madam Speaker, we remain frustrated by Healthscope's decision to end provision of maternity services early this year. The CLP government has acted to fill a void left by Healthscope, which announced in February it would close its maternity services in Darwin. The Commonwealth are currently leading work with the receivers of Healthscope regarding the continued operations of the private hospitals, including the Darwin Private Hospital. Madam Speaker, I have recently met with the receivers of the private hospitals, McGrath Nicol, as well as the CEO of Healthscope and Minister Butler across various forums. The Northern Territory has made clear that the restoration of private maternity services is an essential element of what we want to see at the private hospital under any new ownership. Madam Speaker, we'll continue to work with the relevant parties to look to restore these services if it is at all possible. We want parents in the Northern Territory to have options available that meet the needs of those with private health insurance. And we're also working to address the facilities currently offered in our public hospitals to ensure they remain fit for purpose and receive the attention they deserve. Madam Speaker, in closing, if there's one thing to take away, I suggest that Labor get on board and start advocating for the $386 million shortfall that we face here in the Northern Territory. Stop sitting back, stop whinging, stop complaining, get on board and start advocating the Labor federal government to get more money for the Northern Territory. Thank you.
Member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎𝙎.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And one thing I haven't heard in this entire debate tonight is about the good people of Central Australia, the southern region of the Northern Territory that continually gets overlooked. Madam Speaker, people in Central Australia have babies too, believe it or not. Now, it might be hard to have a baby in Tennant Creek. You might not actually be able to have a baby in poor old Tennant Creek, because poor old Tennant Creek gets forgotten. But, Madam Speaker, let's be clear here. We are talking about maternity services, and I want to absolutely acknowledge that maternity services are delivered right across the Northern Territory in some way, shape or form. But, you know, the good old people of Alice Springs, my lot, we don't actually have a private hospital at all. We've had attempts at a private wing or a section of the public hospital being a hospital. But let's get one thing clear. Central Australia has an amazing health network and they have an amazing maternity service in Central Australia. And so many of our amazing mums and dads and caregivers absolutely have access to that service in Central Australia. Now, we haven't had the privilege of having a private hospital in Central Australia, and many Central Australians often have to deal with a difficult question to get private health insurance or not, because we don't have a private hospital. Now, I'll always say, Madam Speaker, that public is best. I am the product of a public healthcare system. My brothers and sisters were. I am assuming many people in this chamber have had their children in a public hospital. So I will always back the public system first. Absolutely, through and through, it's the best service that we've got. But, Madam Speaker, let's just be clear, when we're talking about this, that there is a big, wide territory, there are other services out there. Women in remote Central Australian, or in the context of anywhere, women in remote communities don't have access to the private system, and they have very limited access to the public system to be able to have a baby on country. So there are a whole range of options that we can be talking about and looking at here, and I really encourage us tonight to reach beyond just talking about the need for a private hospital in Darwin. Yes, it's important. Yes, it's part of the healthcare system and the network. Yes, it's probably absolutely necessary. But yes, there is a bigger part of the territory outside that absolutely needs ongoing investment into maternity services. So I guess, Madam Speaker, as we are talking about it, I want to acknowledge that I've got relatives in Darwin who were pregnant, had to make a decision. They had private health insurance. They said, I'm not going to a hotel because I'm not here to have a holiday, I'm here to have a baby. So they went down to South Australia to give birth to my little cousin. This is the landscape that we're in at the moment. Now, I am not going to be here tonight. It's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. We know we've got an issue. We know we all need to work on fixing it. We know that there is investments right across all of the healthcare systems when we're talking about maternity services. So whether it's Alice Springs, whether it's doing the work to ensure that families in Tennant Creek can actually stay in Tennant Creek to have a baby is important, and that's necessary work that needs to happen. I'm sure the Education Minister's given birth to her children in Katherine, yeah, it is an amazing hospital. I think, you know, when we talk about it, these are the systems that we also need to look at as getting behind and investing in and backing our public system as well. I know the member for Araluen always talks about the need to build a new hospital in Alice Springs. I'm waiting for a here. And this is important. We do need to have these conversations. We're talking about Tasmania and that absolutely. Tasmania worked with the Commonwealth Government to get that investment. I'm hearing tonight that we all want to see these investments happen right across the Northern Territory so that families can be close to those services. From talking to some of the parents, new parents who have had babies in the hybrid model, said that there was certainly an element of anxiety if there were complications in the pregnancy that required, significant medical attention. Having a baby in a hotel is not an appropriate position. That's my view. I think that anyone who thinks it's okay for a woman to give birth to a baby in a hotel is a good idea. I think you're stupid because there is not the relevant services there. There are not the relevant supports there. There is not the absolute guarantee that they are going to be able to respond with the most advanced and up-to-date medical treatment and attention. So in any case, we need to make sure that we're investing in our hospital networks so that women can give birth with this appropriate surrounds. I think there is an element that we have heard of some uncertainty. I think the government said that they'd asked the Commonwealth for $35 million so that they could ensure that an additional 250 births could be catered for in the Northern Territory. And then in the second breath, the Health Minister did say that they have catered for an additional 250 births to take place within that financial year. So I think that there is a discrepancy that people are curious around. Is the $35 million to cater for an additional 250 births within that financial year, or is that costs required? So I think that there are some questions that do need to be rectified. I do think we often hear in this place, the member for Drysdale, a good friend of mine, even though he's on the other side, talks about the need to have courage. And I think that we certainly need to see the Territory working together to have courage to look at overcoming the challenges when it comes to delivering maternity services in the Northern Territory. But again, I just want to re-emphasise that point. Outside of Darwin, not many people have the luxury of private health or private facilities. The only time they get to access those private facilities is if they've got private health insurance and they have it for the extras. That is the only time people have access to use it. So we need to be investing in our public health system so that we have amazing facilities. And one day, yep, we might need to build new facilities. Not Darwin first. Alice Springs should be first for a new facility when the time is right. I know that there's some happy people at that statement, but this is why we have to back our public healthcare system, is so that we can give that absolute guarantee to every single Territorian, regardless of where they live. You can have a baby in Darwin, you can have a baby in Katherine, you can have a baby in Tennant Creek, you can have a baby in Alice Springs, and you can have a baby in country, on country, is where we all need to be working to reach that aspiration. Now, my grandmothers and my mothers, they were born in creeks out in the bush. Those days have changed, but we need to be able to make sure that we can provide the appropriate supports in our regional and our remote communities so that people don't have to do that long commute into town. Because at the moment, if a remote woman wants to have a baby in a hospital, which is her right, she often has to travel long distances. I'm talking about some of my communities, Kintore, Docker River, 700 kilometres from the nearest hospital. It is a long journey for someone who is expecting. It is a journey where they often don't come alone. I think on average it's about 7 people come in when someone comes into a hospital. That puts pressure on all of our social networks, our public housing, our community infrastructure. So if we could get to a point where we're able to invest in maternity services for women and families on country to give birth, that would absolutely be amazing. To return the full rights of women to be able to give birth in Tennant Creek would be absolutely amazing. To do the work to get the public and the private systems fully functioning in Darwin so that women can give birth in either also would be amazing. And certainly to make sure that we're continuing to invest in Catherine's healthcare services is also absolutely integral. there is an issue here as well. We're not just talking about infrastructure, we're talking about families. We're also talking about amazing, amazing staff. Midwifery, midwives, doctors, all of our clinicians do an amazing job, and we absolutely need to make sure that we are recognising and valuing them and looking at what some of the challenges are to attract and retain. Because from my understanding, the private system has also had significant challenges in retaining staff, as has our public systems. So that poses the question, what do we need to do so that we are attracting staff and retaining staff? Do we need to move away from a traditional roster system? Because what we are seeing and hearing is that our agency nursing systems is exploding. Most people are transitioning to that because they can pick and choose their hours. They can come in intensively and do 3 weeks worth of midwifery or nursing or practicing, and then they don't have to work again for another few months. That raises a question around equity for our nursing staff who want to be part of a public system, want to work with the Department of Health, but there's an issue around the roster. I think we need to look at revisiting our roster systems in the public health care so that we can look at transitioning more people away from agency nursing and bringing them back into the public service, bringing them back into the public system and bringing them into regional and remote locations. Like I said, the Alice Springs Hospital is a position that I can speak from. I was born in that hospital. My family are all there, have been born in that hospital. And every day I walk through to visit constituents after they've given birth, I see amazing staff who love what they do. I see families being supported. I see great infrastructure in that local hospital. But I do also hear from the practitioners, hey, this infrastructure does need some work. We cannot, Madam Speaker, you will appreciate this. Some of the nurses that I have spoken to have said, look, you can only renovate something so much until it becomes putting lipstick on a pig or putting glitter on a turd. You have to, Madam Speaker, at some point have an infrastructure plan that is going to deliver absolutely significant refurbishment and reform and new areas. So it is getting old, it is going to require an upgrade at some point, and these are conversations that we should be having about what does it look like on the timeline, the infrastructure master plan. I also want to acknowledge in Alice Springs there is an amazing midwifery team who go out to visit people who do home births, and amazing. They do a great job. We've got so much support there, and we need to just look at how we work in around the agency nursing and that we can transition people back into the public system, because that's where we can drive the most change and we can see that investment. So look, I am hopeful. I know that the member for Berkeley has spoken tonight. I know that the members for Solomon, �𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎, and I will go out tonight and say I think that this is an issue that all of the Territory's federal representatives, all 4 of them, not often do I give them all 4 credit, but I will say I think that this is an issue that is on the radar of all 4 of our federal members around this important piece. And I think that it goes beyond just tonight talking about the private system. I love the public system. I'll back the public system every single day. And I think that we need to have a bigger conversation here around what does maternity services look like into the future in remote communities, regional centres, towns, and of course our major capital city as well, because this is an important issue. We do need to acknowledge that important work that goes on and part of that system, Madam Speaker, because we do hear stories about people giving birth. I know of a woman giving birth a couple of weeks ago in a reception of a community-based organisation because she couldn't get to a health centre in time. In remote communities, when women go unexpectedly through labour, we have to rely on our air retrieval systems. So I just want to acknowledge them tonight, particularly Care Flight and the Flying Doctor, who often have to fly into those communities and do work under duress and pressure, and particularly having families on the plane mid-air who are going through contractions. It's a difficult space, and I just think tonight is a moment for us to all really reflect and honour everyone in the healthcare space who does a job regardless of who is in government. They turn up each and every day. So I just want to value them, acknowledge them, and make sure that we really pay tribute tonight to them. Of course, I support them in their quest for, fair pay and conditions. They are absolutely worth their weight in gold. I congratulate and thank everyone who has spoken tonight, particularly the member for Daly, the Shadow Health Minister, for bringing this opportunity for us all to talk tonight and recognise the amazing contributions that people are making, and also the work that needs to be done right across the Northern Territory.
Member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎.
Madam Speaker, and let me just start by saying that was leadership. That was bipartisan. That was good energy. That is what an MPI should be all about, Madam Speaker, from the member from 𝙏𝙎𝙎. You know, we call him the shadow opposition leader, Madam Speaker, but he is the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎, and I look forward to working opposite him one day. Now, Madam Speaker, what Territorians are sick and tired of hearing, and they're hearing it multiple times this week in question time and now in this MPI, is the member for Daly, the Labor opposition, talking down the hard-working nurses, the obstetricians, the midwives, the doctors who work every single day to keep mums and bubs safe. Make up a point of order, mate. You can't handle the truth.
Could you take your seat, member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎. What's your point of order, member?
Point of order 31. I find it quite disorderly that the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎 has made a personal reflection on myself to say that what he was suggesting there, which is completely untrue, and I would ask for him to retract that. I did not come in here and say I did not support health workers. He's misleading the parliament. So understanding Order 31, it's disorderly because he's made a personal reflection on me, which is not true.
Can you stop talking, all of you? Look, in the scheme of things, I think that's a pretty light call for disorderly, but if you... Look, I started this week off on Tuesday morning by saying that there shouldn't be any personal imputation, so I take that on board. There was some personal imputations there, but I think generally the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎 was attacking your debate. I'm not sure that it was overly personal, but if you've taken it personal, I suggest that you apologise and move on, member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎, and put it to bed. Okay.
Madam Speaker, what Territorians are sick and tired of hearing is, instead of looking at the issues and attacking the actual problems, we spoke yesterday about the great man, Terry Baldwin. There are no problems, only challenges and solutions. And Madam Speaker, those opposite keep trying to bring up the problems instead of working together and taking the leadership of the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎, who just said there he's going to work with his federal colleagues, and I do welcome that, Madam Speaker. Now, Madam Speaker, our hospitals are delivering. Quite literally, we're talking about maternity. Our nurses are delivering. Our midwives in the public health service are delivering. And this CLP government and our health minister are delivering. But what do we get from those opposite? Negative, doom, gloom. The member for Daly gets up and says, oh, this is above politics. I think he said it 3 or 4 times. Well, if it's above politics, stop playing politics, pick up the phone, call the member for Solomon, call the member for Lingiari, call the Senator McCarthy and say get on with the job of funding the NT health system properly.
Stop the interjections, please.
Madam Speaker, he says it's not about sides, then spends half his speech personally attacking our great health minister, the member for Berkeley. You can't call for unity in one breath and then throw mud in the next. That's not leadership, that's hypocrisy. And Madam Speaker, I want to say it again. We do have a federal Labor government that is underfunding the NT health system by the tune of over $350 million a year. That's $350 million, Madam Speaker. I know earlier this week you raised the important matter of investing in Alice Springs Hospital, and I back your calls for that, Madam Speaker, so I understand it is important to have that hospital there. I believe they deliver in the neighbourhood of 600 to 800 births a year in Alice Springs Hospital. And Madam Speaker, in the Royal Darwin Hospital over 2,150 babies are born every single year. That's 2,150 babies, plus the 800 in Alice Springs, nearly 3,000 Territorians added every year, Madam Speaker. That's not collapse, that's capacity. That's not failure, that's strength. The Royal Darwin Hospital and Alice Springs Hospital are doing the heavy lifting. Unfortunately, the private system isn't working. Unfortunately, Healthscope's closure of the private maternity ward was not unique. In the past 8 years, 12 private hospitals across Australia have stopped delivering babies. That's in Cairns, that's in Bunbury, that's in Hobart at the same time as us. And why? Because private births have dropped. Costs have skyrocketed. Insurance has become unaffordable. And there's workforce shortages everywhere. We went from having, 1,000 births a year in the private hospital up here to 250, 260 births per year. That's not sustainable, Madam Speaker. But I see that less of a reflection of the private system not being adequate enough. I see it more as our NT public health service is good enough, Madam Speaker. It's good enough for 90% of births in the Territory, and I back those people that work at the hospital every single day doing a great job, instead of talking them down because the only option is a private birth. Now, Madam Speaker, when Healthscope stepped out, we stepped up. We didn't sit around and whinge and complain. What we did is we acted, Madam Speaker. We worked with NT Health, with private insurers, with doctors and midwives, and we delivered a practical solutions. We created the McNamara Maternity Retreat, a private-styled recovery package for new mums, and while I have been praising the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎, I do want to clarify for the record that no births were taking place in the hospital, hotel, Madam Speaker. They were giving birth in the public hospital and then being taken for an aftercare package at the hotel. That's hotel stays, that's midwife visits, 24/7 phone support, everything they need to rest and recover. We have created the Return to Home Sooner package, Madam Speaker. Support at home, meals, cleaning and care for mother and baby. By October, 53 Territory families have already used these new packages. And you know what they said? They said thank you, Madam Speaker. They said the care was outstanding. They said the staff were professional. They said the midwives were incredible. And that's the difference between the CLP government and the Labor opposition. When the private sector bailed, we built a better model. And Madam Speaker, I want to thank all the midwives, nurses, obstetricians, doctors and everyone else involved in delivering babies in the Northern Territories and who works in our NT health system. Every single one of them. These are the people that are the backbone of this transition. They've worked double shifts 7 days a week, visiting homes, caring for mothers, supporting families. While Labor's been playing politics, they've been doing the real work. It would have been great to see the member for Daly reflect on that real work, Madam Speaker. They deserve our gratitude, not the garbage coming from those opposite. Our frontline heroes, I commend them. I thank them. Labor criticises their output. Labor talks them down. The member for Daly might not think they're doing a great job, but I do. And let's talk about why private hospitals are struggling federally, Madam Speaker. Let's talk about the federal Labor cost of living crisis.
Take your seat, please.
Standing Order 31, disorderly words. I did not ever say I didn't think our healthcare workers were not doing a good job, and he's personally reflected on me. I did not say that once in my speech, and I ask for you to consider for him to withdraw that. I did not once say that. I value our health workers, just like all our members, just like I know all our members in this chamber do. So don't try and bring that into here for
Member
politics.
for Daly, you've made your point.
I'd ask you to withdraw.
Down. It's far easier for you to withdraw.
I will withdraw.
Member for 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎.
Madam Speaker, there's a saying about people who can love to dish it out and they can't take it. In general, Madam Speaker, I'm not referring to any member of this chamber, and that is a glass jaw, Madam Speaker, but I can take it. Now, Madam Speaker, let's talk about the federal cost of living crisis under the federal Labor government. Families can't afford private health cover anymore. The premiums go up, the excess is up, the out-of-pockets cost through the roof. Under federal Labor, people are paying more and getting less. So they're dropping private insurance, Madam Speaker, and that's driving private closures. It's not NT Health that caused this. It's not the Minister for Health who caused this. It's Labor's economic mismanagement. So when the member for Daly points his finger at us, he's pointing the wrong way. He should be pointing at Canberra, Madam Speaker. Our public system is not broken, it's strong and getting stronger. We've expanded the midwifery group practice. We've strengthened the home birth services. We're reviewing maternity models to keep them modern, safe and sustainable. In Alice, Catherine, Gove and for the bush, our hospitals and clinics keep delivering. We don't walk away from rural and remote families, we walk beside them. And before Labor gets back on its high horse, let's remind them of their record. The member for 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎 raised the point that you can't give birth in the Tennant Creek Hospital, Madam Speaker. And I know he wasn't in this chamber when they did it, but it was the Labor Party that closed the public maternity ward in Tennant Creek back in 2006. It was in 2006, Madam Speaker, 20 years ago, the Labor government at the time decided it wasn't worth having a hospital that can give birth at in Tennant Creek. So now Tennant Creek mothers and the mothers in the Barkly have to make the trip down the road down to the Alice Springs Hospital. That's Labor's legacy in regional maternity care. Closure, neglect and excuses. And now they've got the gall to lecture us. Shame. It is a shame job, Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's interjection. It is a shame job what the Labor Party did to the Territory 20 years ago. I do concur. Now, Madam Speaker...
Stop the interjections, please.
The state of maternity services in the Northern Territory is strong because our people are strong. Our workforce is strong and our government backs them every single day. We didn't walk away when Healthscope left, we stepped up. We didn't talk down our hospitals, we backed them. We didn't attack our midwives, doctors, obstetricians and say they're not doing enough in the NT health system, Madam Speaker. We praise them. And while Labor talks about being above politics and the member for Daly keeps dragging it back right into the gutter, personal attacks, political spin and endless negativity. If he really believes it's above politics, then he should get on the phone to his federal Labor colleagues and demand the funding our Territory health system deserves and that our Territory health system needs, Madam Speaker. Until then, we'll keep doing what we've always done, getting on with the job, backing our hospitals, backing our staff, backing Territorians and Territory families, because, Madam Speaker, when Healthscope stepped out, the CLP government stepped up, and that's the difference between us and them.
Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And no matter how intense it gets in this chamber, it will never match the ferocity that I witnessed my wife deliver our two beautiful children into this world. And for any man that's had the absolute honour, and I really mean that, it's one of the most beautiful things to ever watch, to watch a woman bring a child into the world, it will change you forever. I promise you that. And when my first daughter was born, in a room full of people, because a few things went wrong, Dad was the only one crying, quite a lot actually, and because it was just such an amazing moment. And the midwife was patting me on the back. But the core of what I want to get at is just the moment of watching someone you love bring your child into the world is just the most magical moment. I don't think I've ever felt love like it. And so to all the mothers, regardless of the situation that we find ourselves in, I wish you all the best in your pregnancies, and to all the dads, get around it, get amongst it. I was able to help deliver both my girls, and it's well worth it. And before I move on I just want to touch on the member for 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎's visuals. They will stay with me, and which is probably good whenever the Alice Springs hospital situation comes up. But I'd like to say, Madam Speaker, we are in the same boat. And what I mean by that is members of our government are wishing to grow their families. I'm wishing to grow my family, and I want to be able to give my wife the choice of if she wants to go public or private. So we literally are in this with you. We are Territorians as well, and we want to have every mother in the NT to have choice. And I myself am going to one of the events soon, a community forum for mothers on this issue. I've been invited by some Defence mothers who know my link with Defence, and obviously, there's a Defence impact as well. Mothers do get, which is great, mothers with the ADF will get that private option, and it is quite an attraction, you know, and it's something you want in your postings. So I'll be looking forward to going along to that. I do have a few questions around when we found out about HealthScope. I genuinely, and I don't know, but I do wonder, did the former government know about this towards the end of the term? And it's a question I put out there. I don't know the answer, but it's a worthy question. So how did we get in this situation? We have a private hospital who, over the 8 years of the previous government, went from about 700 births a year to 200 and something. That is a massive decrease in private utility of that service. Now, what probably drives that? Well, there's a few things. Economy would have a large part to do with it. The cost, the soaring cost to young families, and it's an immense cost as well that we were seeing here in the Northern Territory. And at a time when we have a plummeting birth rate and we want to be encouraging families to make it as easy as possible for them to grow their families, we saw that big increase. Now, that doesn't surprise me as our economy went completely down the drain. And it's no surprise to anyone that that was the situation over the last 8 years. We had an absolutely stalled economy going backwards. You see it all across our different sectors, and that plays a large part of it. And so, as we've come in, we've seen it's a holistic approach. And when we're looking at what we need to fix in the Northern Territory, and we see a symptom. The Northern Territory was ill, and symptoms are popping up everywhere, and the closure of the maternity suite is another symptom of that sick Northern Territory. And so that is why we are here. That is why our government is here. It is why the Chief Minister, as Police Minister, is cracking down on law and order with police. That is to make the Territory safer so we can attract more doctors, so families feel safe to come here, which will further grow the economy. It's why the Mining and Energy Minister is working on increasing our revenue from mines, growing mines, making it easier to start. Our Major Events Minister is trying to get more major events here. She wants more tourists here. That'll bring in workers. Again, it'll grow the economy. We've got our Asian Relations Minister travelling all over Southeast Asia to reconnect with countries we haven't had connections with since the 90s because Labor threw away that position. And so we are now once again going back to our closest neighbours to increase trade, all to boost this economy so that we can bring back choice. We have the Education Minister ensuring there are pathways so Territorians can go into the health field. They will know the nuances, the intricacies, the culture, and we can start filling those positions ourselves. The Treasurer, he's been left a horrendous problem, and this is the balance he's trying to play. He wants that deficit brought down. He wants to have a book where he can then properly fund our public institutions to deliver maternity services. And we've seen, again, with the Minister for Lands and Planning, huge reforms to cut red tape and ensure that we can actually get this economy moving. And the good Minister for Sports, People and Culture, ensuring that the people of the Northern Territory have access to the sporting fields they need to stay healthy and enjoy life as well. And so what I'm getting at, we have a holistic approach to this problem. And that is all going to help the Health Minister when it comes to ensuring Territorian women have choice. Because here's the really important piece. HealthScope is a private company. Now, the member for Daly, and I think it's really important that the opposition leader clarifies the Labor Party's stance. The member for Daly stood up and said, yep, HealthScope's gone under. The Treasurer controls the money, so what's he going to do? I need to know, and the people of the Territory need to know, does NT Labor have a policy that taxpayers' money should be going to national or multinational health industry to bail them out? It's a very important question because that is a significant policy point. So either I would like the opposition leader to very much clarify what is their position regarding taxpayer money and private companies, because there was a strong insinuation by the member for Daly and it needs to be clarified. We are in government, member for Daly, and the role of the government is to ensure that our public system is working well, and as I've just highlighted, that every minister is doing their part to grow the economy, to make a healthier Northern Territory, so that there is a private demand for the choice. Now, I am not one who believes on a principle that public funds should be used to bail out large companies. We don't do it for small business, we don't do it for medium business, and so at the crux of it is that important question. And the member for Daly purposely avoided raising that because he knows he would rather stir up division, he would rather use women who are waiting in their uncertainty than come out and say, is he supporting a HealthScope bailout, or does he want investment in the public maternity services that this House is entrusted with? That is an important question. Now, moving on federally, a shocking figure, $386 million shortfall. The member for Daly also spoke of how great the Commonwealth funding is for us. Well, I wonder if the member for Solomon, because I will trust the member for Daly's integrity, which means the member for Solomon might not have been fully honest with the member for Daly, for we are the most underfunded jurisdiction in the country, with the national average coming between 36 to 37%, and the NT right at the bottom, Madam Speaker, at 31.8%. So where is the $386 million? And now that the member for Daly knows this, will this goose season, will he be contacting the member for Solomon and asking him, are we going to get that money? That's an important question as well, and I'd be keen to hear if the opposition leader will be supporting a call from all Territorians for us to get a fully funded health system here in the Northern Territory and not be the bottom of the pile. So, Madam Speaker, I do appreciate the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎's discussions around the bush, Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, all the communities, and the amount of work that goes into maternity services there, and that the vast majority of the NT does not have a private option. And so I too give my thanks to all those staff, to all the mothers out there who are concerned, to all the mothers who are planning to become mothers over the next few years. Know this: our government and the Health Minister, Steve Edgington, will do everything we can do within our power to ensure there is a private maternity option here in the Northern Territory. We will pull every lever we can to ensure that that option is available to you. The choice, we want the choice. This House is responsible for delivering an excellent public maternity system, and I will back that the whole way, and I'll do everything within my power to make sure you have the choice between a public and private system, because that is what we want for Territorians and it's what we want for Territory mothers. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to talk about this matter of public importance. And many people have shared stories with me and come to me with issues to do with maternity care, so I'm going to share some of them tonight. I do want to start, though, by acknowledging and thanking the incredible people who work in our health system, midwives, nurses, doctors, support staff, who show up every day and give their all, often in incredibly tough circumstances. I've been lucky enough to have 2 babies here in the Territory, one at Royal Darwin Hospital and one at home through the community midwifery program. I also had a partner who the midwife was maybe taking more care of than me because he was, you know, big things happening. But I still remember the names and faces of the midwives who looked after me. Their care, their calm, their kindness, I'll never forget it. And I know that many others carry these same memories because when maternity care is done right, it stays with you for life. We've heard a lot in this chamber tonight about the closure of and outside the chamber, about the closure of the private maternity ward. And in my mind, it's alarming replacement with a hotel. But what we haven't discussed much is the state of birthing services in RDH and the conditions people are forced to give birth in. The situation we have... I beg your pardon, Minister?
Sorry, no interjections.
No, but the private maternity, I'll just repeat, the private maternity ward has been replaced with a hotel. Not to have babies, but that's what happens for women after they come out of the hospital, if they choose it. The situation that we have arrived in is both caused by underfunding and chronic understaffing. Chronic understaffing is stopping the home birth team from operating outside 9 to 5 hours. Chronic understaffing is stopping the full use of the birthing suite at RDH. And chronic understaffing is stopping life-saving continuity of care. Sometimes, women were telling me, with tragic circumstances. Madam Speaker, RDH does not have to run understaffed. The government could fund the hospital appropriately tomorrow. The question is not about money, it's about priorities. If we have enough money to supersize our prisons to the tune of $500 million, then we have enough money to fund healthcare properly. If we have enough money to subsidise the anti-fossil fuel industry, then we have enough money to fund healthcare properly. The Chief Minister proudly said today that she thinks the government should stay out of people's lives and be there in the background, providing security so that if you need to call the police, they will come and help you. And if you need to call an ambulance, they will come and help you. And if you need to go to hospital, you will be looked after and you will be safe. Well, Madam Speaker, according to many of my constituents, that is not happening. Underfunding of maternity care is symptomatic of underfunding of all healthcare in the Northern Territory. And we know we can't have a healthy society if we do not have healthy people. Healthcare is a foundational right in our society. And if the government can't look after us when we need to go to the hospital because they've starved the hospitals of funding, then we need to think hard about the priorities that they are choosing for us. Madam Speaker, I want to take the time now to amplify the voices of a group of people who've been coming together to share their birth stories and are calling on the government to make critical changes to birthing services in Darwin and in the broader Northern Territory. And I want to in particular thank one of my constituents for bringing this group to my attention and to sharing their work with me. Madam Speaker, this group shared the following on October 7 in a media release. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, babies in the Northern Territory are dying at a rate more than twice the national neonatal loss average. At the same time, mothers at Royal Darwin Hospital are facing conditions that no woman in a capital city should expect. Labouring in hospital corridors, recovering from caesarean surgery without air conditioning, receiving ultrasounds on waiting room lounges, sharing bathrooms while in labour soiled with previous patients' blood, or waiting days for essential care because of staff shortages. They are losing babies because of a broken system that fails to provide continuity of care and describe not receiving basic dignity after loss. Grieving mothers whose babies have died are being placed to recover on postnatal wards alongside mothers with live newborns. Others describe devastating delays in diagnosis, limited bereavement services and follow-up due to fragmented care. We are tired of excuses. In 2025, giving birth in the Northern Territory has become a lottery, safe and supported if you're lucky, but too often traumatic and sometimes tragic. On Saturday, 4th October, around 100 women and men, including parents, birthing people, midwives, doctors and healthcare advocates, gathered in Darwin for a closed community forum to speak openly about their experiences of maternity care across public, private and home birth settings. The stories shared were raw and confronting, exposing failures across every stage of maternity care, from early pregnancy to labour to postnatal support. Some of these stories are distressing, but I'm reading them out from their media release. One person shared, "My baby died shortly after birth. I was placed in a postnatal ward surrounded by the cries of healthy babies. There are limited bereavement services." Another shared that I have had 8 pregnancies and 2 children. With my history of loss, I tried to access the midwifery group practice at 11 to 12 weeks for early support, but I was told I wasn't eligible. The early pregnancy clinic doesn't start until around 18 weeks, far too late for someone like me. I lost that pregnancy at 14 weeks. Women like me fall through the cracks before care even starts. Another shared, "I went to hospital 4 times with decreased fetal movements and was dismissed each time. At 37 weeks, my baby was stillborn. In my next pregnancy, I was given proper continuity of care and monitoring and my baby survived. Continuity is not a luxury, it's life or death." Another person shared, "I had my baby 6 weeks ago. It was an unplanned C-section. When I got to the room, there was no air conditioning or fan. They gave me a couple of wet towels to put on my neck and told me to point the air purifier at my face for a bit of relief. I stayed one night." Another, "She was born at Royal Darwin Hospital. They said she was healthy and we were sent home. Weeks later, I was told the wait to see a paediatrician was 1 year. By the time we got a diagnosis, spinal muscular atrophy, type 1, it was too late." A forum attendee shared this, "We used to offer choice, private obstetrics, home birth, midwifery group practice, a functioning birth centre. Now every option is being stripped away." Madam Speaker, the release from this forum went on to say, "Healthcare workers back these stories with clinical evidence, workforce shortages, insecure contracts and casualisation are driving skilled midwives and obstetricians out of the system. Meanwhile, critical infrastructure is underused, including the birth centre and Palmerston Hospital's maternity unit, both of which could relieve pressure immediately if properly activated." The release went on to say political inaction has consequences. Despite repeated warnings, Minister for Health Steve Edgington has taken no meaningful action, relying instead on the line that he has requested federal funding. Meanwhile, services continue to deteriorate and families pay the price. Chief Minister Leah Whanakiara must now intervene. This crisis is happening on her watch and the Territory's women, families and healthcare workers expect leadership, not silence. This is what Territory families are asking for. There are four key asks that reflect the 219 women-centred care strategic directions for Australian maternity services. 1, choice in birth. Women should be able to choose the setting that is safest and right for them: hospital, midwifery-led care, home birth or private pathways. Continuity of care. Women deserve trusted caregivers before, during and after birth. This model reduces interventions, improves outcomes and saves lives. Staffing and support. Midwives and clinicians need secure, full-time roles, proper investment and incentives to stay in the Territory. Without this, safe care is impossible. And community voices in decision. Women, families and clinicians must have a formal seat at the decision-making table to ensure services meet real needs. Madam Speaker, this group of incredibly brave people sharing these personal stories and calling for change have sent invites to all members of this chamber to attend the next Birth Stories Forum on the 1st of November at 12 p.m. at 66 Smith Street. As the forum organisers say, these stories are not statistics, they are lived experiences of loss, trauma and resilience. It's time for our leaders to listen in person and act. For far too long, the NT Government, the Department of Health and RDH's executive team have failed to act. Palmerston Hospital sits underutilised, families are left to endure unsafe conditions, and babies are dying at double the national rate. We are tired of excuses. In 2025, giving birth in the Northern Territory has become a lottery, safe and supported if you're lucky, but too often traumatic and sometimes tragic. Chief Minister 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 must show leadership where her Health Minister has failed. The Territory's maternity crisis is a test of her government's commitment to women, families and the future of the Northern Territory. Enough talk, the time for action is now. Madam Speaker, I share this media release from the forum so that everyone in this chamber can hear it. And I support their call on the government to uphold the 4 recommendations of the Women-Centred Care Strategic Directions for Australian Maternity Services made by this group. And I want to close with the words of one of the forum attendees, a senior clinician who said that yesterday's problem becomes today's emergencies because no one is responsible end to end. That costs lives. Madam Speaker, the time for excuses is over, the time for federal blame shifting is over, the time for bureaucratic inaction is over. Territory families are not asking for the impossible. They're asking for what the Chief Minister herself promised, that when they go to hospital, they will be looked after and they will be safe. And they're saying right now that is not true. And every day the government delays is another day that people are put at risk. I support their call to the Health and Chief Minister and all MLAs to attend the Birth Stories Forum in November. Listen to these families, look them in the eye and then come back to this chamber and tell us why $500 million for prison is a priority, but ensuring safe births and proper maternity care is not. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Sanderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on this matter of public importance, the state of maternity services in the Northern Territory. This is a deeply important issue, one that affects women, families and the health workforce across our community. The birth of a child should be a moment of joy and hope, not a source of anxiety and uncertainty. Madam Speaker, the recent decision by HealthScope to close private maternity services in Darwin has understandably caused concern among families and health professionals. For many years, that private facility provided valued care and choice for Territorians. Its closure represents not only the loss of a service, but the loss of an option, and I know many families are feeling that very personally. It's important to understand why this happened. HealthScope, which operates Darwin's private hospital, has been open about the reasons. Over the past decade, private birth numbers have steadily declined from around 700 in 2013 to fewer than 300 in 2024. That reduction in births made it increasingly difficult to keep the service financially viable. There were also local workforce shortages, particularly in experienced pediatricians and senior midwives, which made safe and consistent staffing more difficult. Added to this way, rising operational and compliance costs, from locum expenses to insurance and indemnity requirements. Taken together, these pressures led to commercial judgment to close the service. While we may understand the reasons, that does not make it any easier for the families affected or for the staff who have dedicated years of their careers to supporting Territory mothers and babies. Madam Speaker, I want to take this moment to acknowledge and thank the midwives, nurses, doctors and support teams at the Royal Darwin Hospital who have stepped up in recent months to meet the increased demand. The transition has not been simple, but the dedication of the team at RDH has been outstanding. I have worked at Royal Darwin Hospital myself, and I know the caliber of people who serve there. They are compassionate, professional, and deeply committed to their patients. As someone who has spent much of my professional life in health, I also know the emotional load that comes with this kind of work. I was trained as both a registered nurse and a registered midwife in India, and while I'm registered in Australia as a registered nurse, my heart has never left the practice of midwifery. It is one of the most challenging yet rewarding areas of healthcare. It is about bringing new life into the world, about care, reassurance, and trust. As a parent, I have experienced this personally too. My own child was born in Darwin Private Hospital, and many of my friends, neighbors, and constituents have had their children at Royal Darwin Hospital. The stories I hear from them are filled with gratitude for the skill, compassion, and dedication of the staff. They speak not only of excellent clinical care, but of human kindness. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we all recognize there are real challenges in the health sector: workforce shortages, the high cost of recruitment, and strain on services in a growing population. These challenges are not unique to the Northern Territory. They are being felt across Australia and indeed across the world. But what matters most is that this government is taking action. The Minister for Health and the Royal Darwin Hospital leadership team are working closely to ensure that transition following Healthscope decision does not compromise the safety or quality of care for mothers and babies. Our government is committed to supporting the staff, strengthening public maternity services, and looking at long-term solutions. That includes exploring ways to rebuild private maternity care in Darwin. Territorians deserve choice, and we know that private and public systems can complement each other. A balanced model provides flexibility for families and helps to relieve pressure on the public system. We must continue to create an environment where private providers can operate sustainably, where they are supported by strong workforce pipelines, training programs, and local recruitment initiatives. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a time for collaboration, not blame. The opposition has raised this matter, and that's fair. But we must all recognize that finger-pointing will not solve the issue. Supporting mothers and babies requires teamwork across government, the health sector, and the community. The government's focus is on solutions, on listening, acting, and strengthening the system. To our nurses, midwives, and doctors, thank you. You have shouldered an enormous task with professionalism and grace. To the families impacted by these changes, we hear you. We understand that this is not an easy time, and we are working to ensure you continue to receive safe, high-quality care. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as a nurse, as a trained midwife, as a father, and as a member of this House, I believe that every territory mother deserves the best start for her baby, every midwife deserves support, and every family deserves care they can trust. This government is standing with our health workers and with our families to ensure that new life in the territory continues to begin with safety, dignity, and hope. I commend the government's ongoing work, and I thank all those who continue to serve in this vital area of care. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to take on a couple of points from what we discussed in this chamber earlier. There was a discussion around like casualization of the workforce. I worked with the ND Public Service or ND Health for nearly 10 years, and I worked in the senior leadership role as well in the last 3 to 4 years of my career. All I can say is about like there were like nearly 30% of full-time vacant positions in the area that I used to oversee in the psychiatric area, which was similar in the other areas as well. So I don't think where the information is coming about like the government is trying to casualize the workforce, that's one of the reasons. That is not the reason. The reason is we can't attract trained or skilled clinicians and staff members to the Northern Territory. And I know that it is easy to say that we need more staff members, we need additional clinicians and skills and supports. There is a environment that we need to provide for increase the population as well. That's why this government has these three key pillars about the reducing crime, rebuilding economy, and restoring lifestyle. I know that many see that we are repeating that again and again. There is a reason why we have these three key pillars, and the reason is once we reduce the crime, it will improve how people feel about the territory. They feel safe, and the people who are here in the territory will not leave the territory because of the crime issue. And once we delivered on the rebuilding economy, which the Chief Minister and the Treasury is working really hard on, so once we have the economy to flourish and move forward, again, like the teenagers and the uni students that's currently here, they're not going to leave out of the territory, so we can retain them. And we clearly see about the issues with the hospital delivery of the numbers that's dropping over the last 10 years from 2013 to 2024. And one of the issues is around the affordability. An ordinary individual with, even if the 2 members of the family is working, it is hard to afford. So there are various factors, and the last one is the restoring lifestyle. So the reason why the government has the 3 key pillars, and we all are working on that, because we are sure with these 3 key pillars, if we are going to address, we can address this population issue, we can have like a flourishing economy, and we can have a really good lifestyle, which will attract and retain the skill force that we needed, and that won't be an issue for the health system probably in future. But again, like at this point in time, what we need to do is about, like us government, we will support the Minister for Health, because he's doing a great job and advocating for us in Canberra. And as we discuss here, we need like all the levels of government want to work together. We need the strong voice of our federal representatives in Canberra as well. There is always good to blame each other in politics, but when it comes to the matters like the health, we need to make sure there is bipartisan approach, and we stand by with Minister Edgington and Minister for Health and with the NT Health. And I just need to once again thank all the hardworking clinicians in the front line and making sure that they are providing that service for Territorians at the front line where it's needed. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Member for Northcliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I rise today to speak about a crisis that is unfolding in our maternity services. And it's a crisis that affects every family in the Northern Territory, but one that does fall often heavily on the shoulders of First Nations women and their families. In June recently, there was a newspaper article which shared the story of a local woman here in Darwin and her recent experience giving birth at Darwin Hospital. Her experience should, I hope, push this government to action. So she arrived at RDH in active labour, and I think this story has been shared here before tonight. She spent 3 hours labouring in a brightly lit, crowded waiting room with no privacy. And when her obstetrician arrived, there was nowhere to take her. 2 delivery rooms sat empty, waiting for cleaners, and the downstairs birthing suite, purpose-built for exactly these situations, which is a beautiful birthing suite, they stood unstaffed that day, so wasn't able to use it. So this woman received her ultrasound whilst having contractions, lying on a couch in the waiting room. This woman said in the news article, everything that was communicated to us, as in from the government, was we can cope with the additional numbers, and they clearly couldn't. It was not a public versus private thing. No woman should be labouring for 3 hours in a waiting room. And she's absolutely right. This isn't about public versus private. This is about a health system that has been starved of resources while women and babies pay the price. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I do want to make clear that I'm in no way criticising any healthcare workers at either of the hospitals. The midwives, nurses, obstetricians, support staff do heroic work, as many people here have said, every single day under sometimes impossible constraints. The problem is not the dedication of our healthcare workers, it's that we're asking them to do an impossible job without giving them the resources, the staffing or the infrastructure they both need to provide the standard of care that they want to give and that women deserve. And for the record, I have birthed at both RDH and the private hospital here before it closed, and I have only wonderful things to say about the staff and service at both those places. And I would just like to make a point, just in some of the debate we've heard tonight and in many criticism here, when criticising, say, a minister or problems in the sector that they oversee, we just get this hysterical response sometimes from the other side about how we're attacking public servants. And it's getting quite ridiculous. It's a really bad faith argument. We had the member for Goyder before practically beating his chest about how much he backs in the public servants and everyone else doesn't. It's ridiculous. I'm here talking today specifically because I back public servants, because I want them to be safe at their jobs and because I want them to be able to have all the resources that they need. You can critique a system and the failings that it has without it being an attack on the workers, and I just wish we would stop seeing this bad faith argument about everyone who tries to critique something. No one's trying to bash the public servants. We know what a hard job they do. Many of us have partners who are public servants and nurses and doctors and AMBO workers and police and all those kind of things. So I just want to make that clear. The closure of Darwin Private Hospital maternity services this year has understandably caused concern. As we've spoken about, it was the only private maternity service here in Darwin, and many women valued having that choice. I absolutely respect that as someone who has had that choice, and I understand the disappointment these families are feeling. I do also think, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this moment does invite us to consider some broader questions about the maternity care landscape. And these are things I think the member for Drysdale touched on, that the fertility rate is hitting record lows. We're having fewer babies, but at the same time, we're in the midst of a significant cost of living crisis. It's not really a choice when people don't have the money to be able to afford private care. So in this context, perhaps we should be asking, What would it look like if we invested in making our public maternity services so excellent, so well-resourced, so responsive that the question of private versus public becomes less about access to quality of care and more genuinely about personal preference? Now, what if Royal Darwin Hospital had enough midwives and enough delivery rooms and enough staff so that no woman ever laboured in a waiting room again? Once again, I'm not here to criticise families who choose private care or suggest that the choice shouldn't exist, as I've had to be in that position myself, but I do think the private hospital closure opens up a conversation about whether we have been underinvesting in our public system and whether stronger public services might actually serve the vast majority of Territory families better, regardless of where they choose to give birth. So while we debate the finer points of private hospital closures, First Nations women across the Territory face a maternity care crisis of an entirely different magnitude. The statistics, as some who were mentioned by the member for Jinson, are stark and shameful. First Nations mothers die at 3.7 times the rate of non-Indigenous Australian women. Perinatal deaths are twice as high. Aboriginal women in the Northern Territory experience preterm birth at more than double the rate of non-Indigenous women, 16% compared to 7%. These are not just statistics. These are incredible mothers and precious babies, and they are families torn apart by preventable deaths and complications. At the heart of this crisis is the systemic denial of culturally safe, community-based maternity care. For 60,000 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women have birthed their babies on traditional lands supported by family, culture and community, and that changed with colonisation. Today, the majority of First Nations women in the NT are forced to evacuate from their remote communities at around 37 weeks of pregnancy to wait alone in regional centres or in Darwin, separated from family and cultural support networks. Sometimes this is alone even from their partners. So birthing on country is not just a romantic notion, it's an evidence-based solution backed by decades of recent research and recommended in national policy since 2012. Birthing on country is described as community-based and governed, allows for incorporation of traditional practice, involves a connection with land and country, and incorporates a holistic definition of health. So we have the evidence. There have been groundbreaking qualitative studies published this year involving First Nations women from remote communities, and they found the crucial role family and community play in the well-being of pregnant and birthing women, and that healthcare providers can build trust through continuity of care, cultural competency, and genuine partnerships with communities. So we know that the continuity of care programs for First Nations women result in greater acceptability of care, greater satisfaction, improvements in antenatal attendance, better monitoring and management of risk factors. Also has lower rates of preterm birth, higher infant birth weight and lower perinatal morbidity and mortality. Yet we continue to force women from their communities away from their families and cultures and continuous midwifery care and wonder why the outcomes remain so poor. And I have to say this on a personal level, it absolutely breaks my heart that women have to birth hundreds or sometimes thousands of kilometres away from their families, their country, and often away from their partners. In 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 recently, I had some wonderful experiences talking to women there and got to visit some birthing trees and actually meet some of the women that were birthed under those trees. And hearing at how devastating it can be for heavily pregnant women, especially first-time mothers, having to even leave their partners to birth in the city. I desperately want to see this change. And if we want to see any advancements in the outcomes for First Nations babies and preterm illnesses, we have to get people birthing back on country. There is a group in 𝙏𝙏𝙈𝙀𝙎 of young women who are leading the charge, and they're establishing a remote birthing on country maternity service. They're calling for evidence-based Western medical maternity care integrated with cultural caring practices delivered by skilled cultural caretakers, local women for pregnant women. Now, the Australian government has committed some funding, $45 million over 4 years under the Healthy Mums and Healthy Bubs initiative, and $22.5 million for a Birthing on Country Centre of Excellence. But this is a fraction of what's needed, and unfortunately the NT government is nowhere to be seen. Which brings me to some of the government's priorities. Nowhere in the budget announcements we saw early in the year did I see specific funding for maternity service improvements. Nowhere was there funding for birthing on country services or commitment to expanding programs such as the Strong Women Worker programs or midwifery continuity of care models. Continuity is a difficult word to continue pronouncing. Now, these issues are, look, these issues did not just appear in the last 12 months. I absolutely acknowledge that. Decades of health underfunding from both major parties at all levels has resulted in this situation. So people in here need to stop throwing stones in glass houses, I think. But the CLP is in charge now, and their response so far has to be prioritise punishment over prevention, incarceration over health, and tough on crime rhetoric over the health and well-being of mothers and babies. We're spending nearly $500 million on corrections while women labour in waiting rooms and Aboriginal women and mothers die at nearly 4 times the rate of other Australians. Our priorities are fundamentally wrong. So these are some of the things that I think we need, that many groups across the Territory are calling for. To properly staff Royal Darwin Hospital maternity services so every birthing suite and delivery room can be used, increasing midwife to patient ratios to safe levels, expanding the midwifery group practice program, the MGP, which I was lucky enough to be part of in my 2nd pregnancy and birth. Those women are incredible. We need to ensure that no woman ever labours in a waiting room again. We need to fund the establishment of birthing on country services across remote NT and expand the existing programs like the Strong Women Worker positions. Provide training, funding for training programs so that First Nations women can be supported by cultural caretakers during pregnancy and birth. We also need to reform the patient-assisted travel scheme to allow all women, not just first-time mothers, to have an escort when they must evacuate for birth. Mr Deputy Speaker, we are at a crossroads here. We can continue down the path that we're on, underfunding our public maternity services and ignoring the desperate pleas of First Nations women for birthing on country services, and accepting the maternal and infant death rates for First Nations people will remain shamefully high. Or we can choose a different path. We can properly fund a public health system so that every woman, regardless of income, receives excellent care. We can listen to Aboriginal women and support them to give birth on country, surrounded by family, culture and community. And we can make the Northern Territory a leader in maternal and infant health instead of the crisis that it is currently in. The woman who I mentioned earlier from the news story who laboured in the waiting room, she had said she intends to write to all the powers that be and hopes it will mean that it won't happen to anyone else. Mr Deputy Speaker, we here are the powers that be. We have the power to change this. The question is, does this government have the will to do so? Our mothers deserve better, our babies deserve better, and Aboriginal women who have endured centuries of dispossession and discrimination deserve so much better than the system we're offering now. It is time to do better and act. It's time to put the health of mothers and babies ahead of political point scoring and budget cuts. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Nightcliff. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I think important contributions that have been made on this very important topic that has been brought to the House by the member Daly, the Shadow Minister for Health, and I thank him for the opportunity to be able to speak on maternity services in the Northern Territory. And we've heard from the Minister, of course, around the government's perspective and what they're doing or not doing, and I do know that this will remain a very important topic for Territorians, in particular our Territory mums, but those health providers, those service providers who support mums and families here in the Territory, the families who are getting ready to have a little one or planning to have a little one or may have lost a little one. So I think the gravity of decision-making for the government is huge, recognising, of course, the tit-for-tat that we've been having for most of this discussion around whose responsibility is it. We firmly want to see, as the Labor opposition, this topic continue to be top of mind. I think that we don't want to see it disregarded, we don't want to see it disrespected, we don't want to see it deflected. And I think hearing the government's plans, I know acknowledging the health ministers has outlined to us, and we've asked many times in the House, but outlined specifically to us this evening what the government has done. We want to urge them to continue to do more, to work around those plans, to listen to the forum. I believe the member for Johnston has already outlined the details for the next forum, which will be held in Darwin, which is grassroots, grass-led Territorians, and particularly Territory mums and health workers who would like to see a firm spotlight on maternity services here in the NT, but particularly in the top end. And I don't need to repeat any of the history of why we're talking about this today, Mr Deputy Speaker, but in earnest, I would like to see the CLP government work collaboratively and collectively with the federal Labor government. I know there's a lot of the political bashing back and forth of whose responsibility it is, so I'm not going to repeat some of those political statements because, as the member for Daly reminded us, we want to try and rise above politics. This is another issue that many people are frustrated with the CLP-NT government and the federal Labor government on this particular issue, which is why the Shadow Health Minister has brought it to light and wants to stay in the light. We don't want it to go by the wayside. It is so important. I know people have spoken about some of their own personal experiences, so I think it's really it really does affect everybody, Mr Deputy Speaker. My big shout out is to the Catherine maternity ward. I know member for Catherine has very much spoken in the past about how great that maternity service is. I can absolutely attest to that in my personal experience. In the short time that I was the health minister, I can also attest to that in my professional experience, and to hear and see the work that happens right across the Northern Territory to support our Territory mums, you know, give birth. It's an exciting part in any person's life, very scary one as well, and very anxious one for somebody. From my personal experience, but it's not always ending in a happy story either. So we do acknowledge that. I know the member for Jinson did read out a very sad but important story that not all mums get to hold their babies after they're born. So I think that the pressure around this topic and issue needs to be given that respect, and it needs to continue to be absolutely a matter of importance, Mr Deputy Speaker. The work around each of our hospitals in the Territory, and some are more regional and remote than others, Mr Deputy Speaker, so having that understanding I think is really important. Like Tennant Creek Maternity Service, the member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 gave us a good history lesson and good political bashing for our political party and why that service is no longer there. And I thought that in my short time as the Health Minister, last year, I thought, great, let's get maternity services back into Tennant Creek. I did a hospital visit there. I learnt from the amazing staff, which, interesting enough, Mr Deputy Speaker, they don't have any locum doctors at Tennant Creek Hospital. I think that is a phenomenal success. No locum doctors. The doctors have locum staff.
Order. Let the Leader of Opposition speak.
Locum. Okay, nasty versus Nazi, locum versus local. I'm talking about locum. Tennant Creek Hospital is the only hospital in the Northern Territory that does not rely on locum, fly in, fly out, drive in, drive out specialist. No, you don't get to tell me how I speak and when I speak on an issue like this.
Opposition, please direct your questions through the chair.
Mr Deputy Speaker, Tennant Creek proudly does not rely on a single external doctor to deliver the Tennant Creek health services. It has a fantastic... Member for
Nightcliff, stop interjecting, please. Continue. Continue, Leader of the Opposition. And can she be heard in silence, please?
Well, I'd like it, because the member for Fanny Bay thinks that because somebody is a man that they can't advocate for maternity services. She was so rude and derogatory when the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎 was speaking, but no, we let her go, let her be rude and show her colours that because you don't come from a particular group that you can't advocate for equality or you can't advocate for better services because of who you are, what you look like, what gender you are, what sexuality you are. So if that's her prerogative, Mr Deputy Speaker, that's for her to deal with. But I don't expect to be interrupted when I'm talking about something that is so important for Territorians, that I have seen work well in our hospital system, that continues to need to work well for our mums, for our babies, for our families, for people who choose to come to the Territory, for people who think that they would like to come to the Territory. In order to have that service, we need to make sure that whoever the government of the day is, whether it's a federal government, whether it's a Northern Territory government, that they're working together. We don't want this issue to drop off the table just because somebody said, yes, we've written to the Health Minister 8 months into our tenure. No, it's the federal government's issue or problem or blame when it comes to health services in the Northern Territory. Of course we need more funding. I said myself to the member for Berkeley, Mr Deputy Speaker, when the government changed, we delivered we delivered an education deal for the Northern Territory, we delivered a remote housing deal for the Northern Territory. The next big thing that the Northern Territory needs, Mr Deputy Speaker, is a health deal. Regardless of politics, health needs to be funded properly in the Northern Territory. And in particular, with this matter of public importance, we need to see maternity services front and centre of that delivery, of that funding. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I absolutely agree with the member for Daly that maternity services should not drop off the table.